Awesome. I wanted to kick off with a couple of words of the context of why this topic is important and why we will probably be talking more about AI in context of organizational design. Wanted to share first perspective that New Zealand is very interestingly and perfectly positioned in the world map to adopt that technology for growth and innovation. We are small as a country. Our corporates are not so bureaucratic as in other countries. We are small and agile enough to actually adopt that innovation and move forward. What it means that actually we can, by doing that, we can lift New Zealand productivity, we can lift New Zealand's economy and do good for all of us, all of the New Zealanders, and lift our standards of living. And this is very important context we wanted to bring, and I would like you to lean into what Will is going to share. Another lens I wanted to share is that at the beginning of this year, I think LinkedIn and media was dominated with like AI is taking our jobs and AI is coming for all the jobs out there and shrinking corporates. But actually the statistics are very, very interesting. So companies that are adopting AI for innovation and growth are finding themselves having a growth of employment rate. And why it's happening? Because they are growing as a business. They are providing more value to the customers, they have more customers, and the growth of employment is increasing. What you can see here is that entry-level jobs, which is like the graduates, the young people, are actually finding more jobs at those and more employment at those organizations. So that's a very important another lens to take if we think about how AI can be adopted and what can be the role of AI in our businesses in New Zealand, especially in the context of growing our economy. So we have dominated this conversation in media about AI is taking our jobs, AI is going to make everyone more productive, but there are other lenses as well to take for what is the value of AI for our organizations. So there's this productivity lens, basically, let's do more or cheaper of the same stuff that we are doing today. But there's this two other lenses. It's growth. So how might we speed up our execution? How might we bring our ideas, projects, initiatives to market faster? So rather than something taking us 18 months, how we can do it in 6 months. And the third lens is the innovation. What kind of services, customer experiences, and products we can create that we are unable to do today because of the limitations of today's technologies. So the companies that are actually seeing the employment growth and customer growth are the ones that are taking those three lenses over probably what's in media a lot is the productivity gain, right? Doing same stuff that we're doing today, but cheaper and faster. So this is the three lenses we'd like to take, and I know Will's talk focus on different areas of that aspect. So very curious to hear more. This year, one thing I wanted to share was Sid. Sid is here. Sid joined Radically this year. He's our head of AI. And at Radically, we are bringing this topic of organizational design, organizational efficiency, and AI together. And we developed executive workshop where we are working with executive teams, senior leaders through different challenges and helping them to less about talking AI as a technology, more talking about the barriers and what it means for the organization to adopt that at scale. And wanted to share a couple of themes that are coming out of those conversations. So the themes that we see is that cultural and mindset barriers is one of the biggest blocker for the adoption. It's not the technology, it's not how much it costs, it's actually ability for the leaders to create action and work across business units and in a cross-functional manner. I think it's the same challenges we've heard about digital adoption exists now. It's just the pain is more visible and greater. Another barrier is what does it mean to run humans and agents teams that work together? What does it mean for leaders to manage that? And how we need to think about organizational design when we are moving to a different construct of organizations. The third barrier is what does it mean for our people strategy? And I know that on some of the chief people officers is already on agenda how our people and leadership strategy need to shift. where the capability needs to grow and how we can grow them. And the last point is finding the balance between the safety and the speed, which is we want to move at pace and how we can do it in a cross-functional manner, but also how we can create safety and where we need to be on the spectrum of centralizing and decentralizing of our capabilities, and what to centralize, what to govern centrally, where we need to decentralize. So those are the barriers and the challenges what we are exploring with our leaders, and just wanted to share those few things that for you to as a context and have in mind as you're going to listen to Will Carey-Hill, is that the opportunities are beyond efficiency of productivity gains, and a lot of barriers are leadership and cultural barriers, which is a good news. It's in our hands to break those leadership barriers, right? It's not the technology limitations. Awesome, thank you. So I'll hand over now to Will to kick us off. Awesome, thank you.
Thank you for that. Great to be back in Auckland. Thank you for the lovely Auckland weather. It reminds me of my time here. I feel very much back at home. Great to be with all of you and talking about this very relevant topic. I'm sure no one's thinking about AI in their roles these days. What we won't be doing today, I won't be giving you the God mode Claude prompt that is going to change your life. But if you respond Will, I'll shoot you my 5 key steps that'll get you going. I'm sure everyone is seeing across your LinkedIn and your Instagram. That's covered by other people who can show you how to set up an agentic harness and get moving on all that. So we won't spend too much time in that space because I think that space is out there. And it's great that it's out there. There's really good information and it's been really democratized in terms of how people are using it. In fact, Anthropic puts out its numbers globally. Any idea what the #1 country in terms of adoption is in the world? I'm getting you to think. I know most of you have outsourced thinking to your AI at this point. It's actually Australia, followed closely by New Zealand at #5. Wow. So we are using AI quite readily. Sadly, the #1 use case is not business. Any idea what the #1 use case is?
Parenthood.
It is parenthood because it's homework. No one wants to help their kids with homework, so the #1 use case is actually doing homework leveraging AI. But what it is saying is that in Australia and New Zealand, we are adopting at a pretty accelerated rate, which is fantastic. It speaks to the ethos of both Australia and New Zealand, where once we get moving, we can adopt things really quickly. Sometimes we're a bit slow to jump on board, but once we do get moving, we move pretty rapidly. So we'll cover off a few things today, and we'll start with maybe why you should listen to me. So anyone who was at the conference a little while ago would have heard my background originally is in neuromechanics, which everyone just goes, wow, that sounds really fascinating. They have no idea what it means. It's just one of those titles that sounds really impressive, but it's essentially brain and body science. And how I got into it when I was 15, I was doing that classic Canadian thing where I was out playing ice hockey, and I had an accident and fractured my femur. So my femur looks very much like that. And in that time, I was hospitalized for 2 weeks and my thigh shrunk to the size of my forearm. And it blew my mind as to how quickly things could change from that perspective and how the body could change so quickly. I had to relearn how to walk after just 2 weeks of being hospitalized. And so I didn't realize just how much was going on to keep us exactly where we are. And that got me really interested in kind of transformational change, but also in the mechanics of how the brain and the body work together. And I think when I was in Europe giving a talk maybe about 12 months ago, and one of the things I spoke about was the work I was doing, we looked at how fast the brain communicates to the body. And the signaling between the brain and the body, like if you step off a curb, which was kind of my research, it's 250 milliseconds for that information to go all the way down to your foot and come all the way back up to your brain, which is faster than the speed at which your muscles contract. So super fast. And as I was over in Europe, I said to them, anyone's organization deliver change faster than 250 milliseconds? Everyone laughed and no one thought that was anywhere near possible. 12 months on, it now feels like being able to execute change at a rate that is close to that fast is not going to be impossible. In fact, we seem to be approaching a point where the cost of delivering change in your businesses and the speed of your delivering change of your businesses is going to get lower and lower and faster and faster. And so that is a good framing for kind of why this information is so important. And interestingly, a lot of the science now is coming from brain science. You're starting to hear terms like nodes and dendrites, and they are essentially rewiring brains in organizations right now. And so I didn't realize there was going to be this colliding of my two worlds, but that's sort of what's driven me in this direction. In terms of in organizations, so great to see Chris and Brendan here who worked with me at Suncorp. We had a really great result at Suncorp. I was there 5 years. That's the share price in that climbing thing there. So you're seeing 100-year-old company was able to double its share price over a period of 5 years, which was a pretty great result. And what I've got up there in terms of delivery metrics, I've said that we 3x throughput, but in reality we 10x throughput. So we delivered 100 projects and programs a year when we started, and they now deliver 250 initiatives a quarter, which is pretty massive. And all of that was just with a small amount of AI at the time. So things like automated testing that we were doing. Now they're very much on the journey of automating the delivery lifecycle as much as they can in spots where it's really slow. And so they'll hockey stick up again in terms of their outcome. But that shows you how doable it is. And if you're thinking that that was in an organization that was at the extreme edge of innovation when we started, I'm sure, Chris, you can attest to the fact that insurance, you've got finance meets risk, so they are quite risk averse when it comes to the culture. And so we had a lot of work just to do in getting the foundations in. And I know I want to make sure that we meet you where you're at in your organizations. No matter where you are, you can get started on a journey like this, or you can keep your organization moving in the direction that it needs to move. So what we'll talk about today will hopefully meet you where you're at in terms of wherever you're at with your organization. So what will we cover today? Firstly, what's different now? Because things have changed. In fact, now it seems like every week things are changing. And how can you build a more living system of work that is moving more rapidly and keeping pace? And then how can you get on the journey to become even more AI native and have a fully intelligent system of work? I think that's the journey that all of us are on. We know that in particular, if you are delivering projects or change or product engineering in your organization, that is one of the #1 global use cases for AI. And so it is absolutely upending how we deliver work today. So what's different now? There's a really cool site worth checking out called Meter. It's the Model Evaluation and Threat Research Company, a non-profit organization. They evaluate AI models. And as you can see, you would have felt it in your daily lives and in your organizations. In the last 12 to 18 months, things have hockey sticked up in terms of where the models are at. So things have just changed rapidly. Whereas, maybe 2 years ago, we were all experimenting with ChatGPT, had a bit of Copilot in our organizations, maybe starting to, help our kids with our homework, apparently. But now, it's become where it's just a differentiator and a game changer, and it's something that we all have to figure out in terms of daily work. So there probably isn't a role out there where it's not going to add value, not going to drastically improve productivity at an individual level, and where I don't know that there's many roles out there that aren't thinking, how do I apply this in my day-to-day life? Just maybe by a show of hands, in your organizations right now, how many of you are using AI? Perfect. No one would want to keep their hand down, I guess. Now, who's able to use kind of frontier models like Claude and ChatGPT in their organizations, the latest ones? A fair amount of us. Anyone using anything else kind of interesting? Anyone into vibe coding tools and co-work? Awesome. Beautiful. So great to see. So as we can see, it's really permeated all of our lives in terms of how we execute. Are there any challenges with AI? Well, yes, it turns out there are. So we've got Microsoft has had to pivot its strategy multiple times. And this is a world-leading organization that was in first on OpenAI from an investment perspective. So they were sitting on Copilot, they were sitting on great connections to GitHub, they were sitting on OpenAI, and still managed to fall behind in where the models were going. So they've had to pivot their strategy over the last 6 months multiple times. And that's with a great leader in place. I've got a leadership crush on Satya. He seems like an awesome leader. So even with great leadership, even with huge capital, even working in the space, they still got it wrong. Starbucks, anyone see the Starbucks case? 11,000 stores had to pull AI out because of inaccuracies in their inventory accounting. So again, I know in Australia and New Zealand, we frown upon Starbucks' coffee because we have much better coffee here locally, but you can still respect the scale of their organization and the capital that they have behind it, and they got it wrong as well. You would have seen Uber had torn through all of its tokens for the year in a matter of a few months. Meta as well was racking up a huge bill when it came to tokens. And then, I don't know if you saw more recently, the models got out. Mm-hmm. Pretty scary stuff when it comes to that standpoint. And this is not to sort of downplay these organizations and kind of go, point at them and say, these are actually some of the most mature and well-funded organizations in the world, and they have had challenges. So we should certainly not expect that we won't have challenges ourselves as we start to roll out more and more AI at scale. And I'm not sure what your LinkedIn is saying, but my LinkedIn is screaming at me that the problem is that the models are advancing at a rapid pace, but the human operating system is not keeping up. So I can't scroll past 3 posts without someone just screaming at me, hey, it's the operating model, and we've got some work to do there. So I see a lot of nods. We've all acknowledged that that's the place we need to work. Now, if you think I'm here to sell you a consulting framework for an operating model, I'm not. Here's a bunch of free ones. You can just take a photo of that, put that through your favorite frontier model, get them to pull. Every strategy house is trying to sell you an operating model that will help you with AI right now. I'm happy to give it to you for free, run it through your AI, and I know Casper's sitting here, no, Will, don't give away the operating model. It's not just about the framework, right? The framework is in fact free now. Right? And you'll get a really good one. You run it through your frontier model, you run and you ask it, put in a little bit of your organizational context, and you ask it to spit you out a framework, it'll spit you out a pretty good one. But the problem is actually implementing it and getting it in. That's where the rubber really meets the road. And so that's where hopefully I can add a little bit of learned experience and kind of bring about what we've been able to look into. So what's changing? It is now easier to write code. It is now easier to design and build solutions. Easier than it has ever been before, and that was always such a big bottleneck. It was expensive, and it took a long period of time. It's now getting cheaper, and it's now getting faster. But the problem is, if we've only sped up that part of it, it just hits the bottlenecks to the left and right of that more quickly. And that's what we're seeing right now. Any of your cyber teams overloaded right now with work? Legal with all these new contracts and trying to figure out what's happening at the user end and at the customer end? Hey, we've been able to 2x, 3x our output. Great, am I ready to absorb all of that? Environments are a challenge when you're releasing and deploying into environments. Managing across, we've really enabled the individual, but the multiplayer level of this, how we get people to work together across that, we've not enabled as well. So these are some of the challenges we're seeing in organizations, and this is where I think the work will be for the next little while. Because to get the latest OpenAI models or the latest Anthropic models in the hands of your people, while there may be a few barriers to overcome, be it cost, be it governance, you can probably crack that. But getting it into a connected operating system that's not something you can snap your fingers and make happen. So that feels like the work we've really got to start together and get moving on. Why? Tesla's law is a great call out for us, and it posits that complexity doesn't go away. It only moves. So if we have reduced the complexity in designing and building solutions, in executing projects, we have simply moved the complexity somewhere else. And that's really important for us to keep in mind here. So what I'm learning as I'm out in our organization is it has moved towards strategy and planning, so decision making. The complexity of decisions have ramped up as well. It has moved towards collaboration and orchestration, and then it has moved towards pre-release and deployment and the amount of checks we have to do. We now have developers who can spit out lines of code super quickly, but who can go through those lines of code and actually find out where the problems that we've had, some cases where we had to go back to doing it the old way simply because the amount of code, it was good code, but the code reviews were that complex that was where we were starting to fall down. And how are we going to operate, maintain, observe? Who's keeping track of all the models? I'm not sure about your organizations, but in some organizations I've been in, we had trouble just keeping track of our old bots and maintaining them. And this is now multiple generations beyond that. So model management, model standards, what are they grounded in? All of those questions are going to really start to ramp up as well. So what can we do about it? If we look at those 4 areas and some things that we can do. In terms of AI augmented decision making, this is something that we built and have employed. It took us several months to kind of crack this at Suncorp. I'm now at a fintech called Tyro. We rolled this out in 1 month. So you can move pretty quickly on this once you figure it out. And that is, I think you need to treat your strategy a little bit more like you used to treat your projects and programs, which is you need to think about how your strategy can be decomposed and be consumed at multiple levels, because you will start to have a really enterprising developer or product person who can execute on an entire strategy themselves with a bunch of agents, or you might be starting to experiment with agentic capability and you might need a pretty digestible task that can be repeated and automated by sub-agents. And you'll need to be able to differentiate the multiple levels of breakdown from a big complex problem that maybe a small team is able to get on and solve pretty well to maybe some repeatable stuff that would get picked up by a more agentic execution layer and be able to get that moving. Most of you, I would imagine, would have experimented in the last few years with your own work breakdown structures and kind of how you align it to strategy. I think the big ninja move here is making sure all of your work is hard-coded from an alignment perspective to strategy, because if you're expecting that your execution is going to get faster and faster, we need to know we're working on the right things. About 4 years ago, we started working on this problem with Atlassian. So I'll show a few of where we've landed, and it'll be a little bit Atlassian-centric. But the reason being, we started working on that. The reason for that was, at Suncorp, we had a 20-year history with Atlassian. At Tyro, where I am now, we have a 10-year history with Atlassian. We had so much good contextual information in Jira and Confluence. It was a great place for us to start. We had decades of context. The other thing that we've been looking at is, as models are changing so quickly, so if you'd asked us 9 months ago, we might have been using Copilot. If you'd asked us 6 months ago, we might have been using ChatGPT Enterprise. If you asked us now, we might be using Claude. And you're seeing now even Microsoft starting to use the Asian models that are starting to come in from a cost perspective. So at that frontier execution layer, the models are changing quickly. If you have to take that model out and put in a new one, you need a layer of organizational memory and context that stays with you a little bit longer. So that's why we made the choice to partner with Atlassian on this. And so now our leaders can manage their strategy dynamically as if it were tasks on a project. And so every objective and key result is now tracked dynamically, and we can build a custom dashboard for each leader, toggle on, toggle off just the things that they care about so that they can see that quite dynamically. And they can now query, using natural language, what they should care about that's important. So even from their mobile phone, just go, how are we tracking on this particular strategy? What are the things that I should care about? And even, hey, my team's coming in an hour. What should I be asking them? Now, most of you will get that conceptually this should be doable now with what you're experiencing just yourselves with the way that you're using AI. The key, I think, is how you connect it across the organization and draw from the really good contextual information. And that's where it does take some work, but you can get there. And I think it becomes more and more important as we're starting to drive decisions. I personally am seeing that AI augmented decision-making at that executive level, while we can put a strategy document into our frontier model, for example, and summarize it and bump it up quite effectively, actually making organizational decisions is still a bit of a gap for most organizations, but I think it's closing quite quickly. So I thought I'd pause and just give you a chance. I'm talking for a little while. Just at your tables, would love for you to check in. How is your organization augmenting strategy and decision making and considering that aspect for the current era we're in? I'll just give you 2 minutes to have a quick discussion at your table and quickly introduce your names. Some people have an aversion to putting some of that, that really proprietary information and that really market-sensitive information into AI, and that's totally understandable. Also, it's causing us to question, what even is our organization? What is our moat? What is it that makes us unique? And that kind of is getting back to purpose and strategy, and who your customers are becomes really important, because your tech can be commoditized. A lot of your execution can be commoditized. So if you don't really own your purpose and your strategy and your customers, then what is protecting you from someone somewhere else in the world with a Claude license and an army of 1,000 agents, the single person billionaire that they're calling out? I'm not sure I'd want to work with whoever that person is. I like working with others, but it is a reality that a lot of the barriers to entry in all of our industries are lowering. So it is causing us to ask, what is it that makes us unique, and how do we keep hold of that and make sure that we're protecting it? Great insights. So obviously some cool use cases there around strategy. So I think firstly the ninja move is, how do we get AI into augmenting our strategic decisions? A great use case here, where even if it's just around strategic direction, analyzing what we're doing, producing some of those directional aspects of our strategy can become a lot easier. Aligning work to goals, another big ninja move there. I wanted to talk a little bit about planning and prioritization. So firstly, I don't know about you, but the number of initiatives, the organizations I'm in, it's just going up and up. And so this old idea of we're going to do 5 things and those are the only 5 things that matter, I'm not sure there's an organization out there that exists that is only working on 5 key things at this point in time. It's probably closer to 50 or 500. And so my view around that is, well, that's the reality of what we're in. We actually need to evolve our system to be able to handle multiple priorities. Yes, we want to be focused and not frenetic, right? In our pace, we just don't want to be moving off in a million different directions. But the reality is we also have to do more things because we've got this really disruptive technology that's coming in and changing how we work. We have to do that. We have to do the governance around it. We have to work through the FinOps and how we're actually going to figure out how we're going to pay for it. We've got to take our people on the journey. Plus, we've got to do all the lights on stuff we always had to do. Plus, we've got to keep our customers or key users and stakeholders happy. So all the work we used to do has not gone away. Plus, we've got all this new stuff coming in. And so it just means we are doing lots of things. And I think every organization I've been in and working with, the first question is, how do we get back to the old ways where we were clear on what the 10 things was that we were going to do? And I think those days are gone. Now, yes, we can use AI to help us kind of prioritize and focus, but I also think we just need to up our capacity to be able to execute more. And the good news there is that it's becoming easier and cheaper to execute on those key initiatives. So when you put those two things together, it means we need a system that can handle being able to execute on more things. So firstly, I think the planning that we have always done becomes more important. So as we are all working with, our great augmented capability, I've found in organizations I'm working in, when we do come together to plan, those become even more important. It's a chance to connect. Sometimes people working remotely haven't seen each other in a while, and we forget about that. It's just a good time to come together. Not that it has to be, co-located planning. It can be obviously multi-location and virtual, especially with some of the great tools now. But I think the moments when we pause and plan become really critical. Also, if something goes wrong, and it will go wrong, you want to be able to backtrack to the plan and the point in time where you made that departed from where you needed to be and be able to course correct. So I think planning becomes way more critical. The ninja move that we're seeing is, I think we need to drop everything a level. That's probably the easiest way to think about it. So a year becomes a quarter becomes a month, right? What used to be a sprint is now a day, and what used to be a day is minutes or hours. But that means you need to actually resize all of your work and reset your planning cadence. And if you haven't got there yet, I think you probably will get there. Otherwise, you're going to have, this is one of the reasons why we're seeing individual productivity go up, but team productivity and organizational productivity isn't changing, because if we stay anchored to the same cadence and the same, if you tell someone something should take 6 months to complete, guess what? It's going to take 6 months to complete, even with some really amazing capability. Whereas if you start to compress those time frames with people's ability to execute now, you'll be amazed what they're able to get done. It doesn't mean things still can't take time and you can't still review things and polish things up and make them better. In fact, you probably need to spend more time in those steps than you do in getting to a first draft, because your first draft of things should be a lot quicker than it used to be. But I think the ninja move that I'm certainly seeing in organizations is, how do you compress your work and how do you compress the time frames in which you do it? So if you were running QBRs, it used to be that if you had a monthly business review on top of that, that might have felt like overkill. Now we're finding that doesn't feel that way, because we're pivoting at least on a monthly basis, and something has changed in terms of the progress or lack of progress we've made against the objectives and key results that we have. So we still do sort of annual big bet strategic setting, and annually we make sure all of our work aligns to goals, and then we check in quarterly and we check in monthly around that, and we still have kind of a weekly cadence that we run around that. But we now go a story, which used to take multiple days, no longer than a day. An epic, no longer than a week. An initiative, trying to get it down to a month. So a project that used to take 6 months, we're now aiming for a month. May take us 2, may take us 3, but we are compressing the way we think about how it takes us to execute on our work, and that has been a big unlock for us. Now, again, that means a proliferation of initiatives. It means you're going to have more. So you need a system to be able to account for that. But in this day and age where you need to execute on a lot of things, I think it does give you that ability to double your capacity to be able to execute against it. So if you are getting things done in a half or a third of the time, the capacity that opens up for you to execute is huge. So then, of course, to support that, we now have really dynamic prioritization happening across our organization, because in Tyro, where I'm at now, we're in the neighborhood of, say, just planned for, say, 150 initiatives, and that's across 300 people. That's an initiative for every 2 people. Whereas it used to be like you'd have 10 or 20 people working on an initiative previously. So that just shows you how many you've got and what you need to be able to work through prioritization dynamically. we now have the ability, you can see all 150 initiatives live, you can see the progress against all of it, you can source in terms of any of the risks that are coming up around that as well. And I think, again, that's another just absolute necessity in this day and age where you just are managing a lot more initiatives than you used to manage previously. So that really, if you think about sort of 1 to 10 or 1 to 20 previously down to 1 to 2 in our organization, that's a huge shift in terms of the number of initiatives. So I'll just check in with you at your tables. How is your organization changing and augmenting how you plan and prioritize? What's changed for you? Over to you. And I might keep us moving. It sounds like pretty aligned on the prioritization piece. One, still some work to be done there. Getting everything in one place is a real ninja move, and it's now easier to do that than it's ever been before, if still a bit fragmented and convoluted. And every time I do a prioritization session like that, I always find more work that was sitting somewhere in another source. So that's, we're all in the same boat there. It doesn't need to necessarily be in a nice, clean format. Just asking that question, where is all the work? Where is all the activity? Can we see it? Do we have it in one view is super important because usually you find you thought you had 20 priorities and it turns out you have a lot more work to actually deliver on those priorities. I'll jump into kind of the delivery lifecycle just briefly, because as I said, again, there's lots of information out there around that now. A couple things I wanted to call out. One, most of the AI models that we're talking about sit on the left-hand side here. In terms of the different models, there'll be more that people might be using. But let's not forget about the fact that most of us are sitting on legacy SaaS tech stacks, and that creates a challenge in and of itself. So we can now connect them much more easily through MCP and through various connectors. The challenge is, as you've probably already found, that can blow out your cost from a token consumption perspective because you now have multiple repeated calls happening, and it's not necessarily the bounded context that you would want. So that's something that, as you think about your operating model, and you'll need some architectural support, but I think the ninja move there is set up your information architecture before you set up your AI. So IA before AI. How do you want to, dive into that context and that knowledge? How do you want it to be shared? Just because your frontier models can access all the information, do you really want them to? Because the FinOps side of your world is going to blow out very quickly, and that's where you see the Ubers and the Metas of the world. It can now not become this great cost saver that you thought it was going to be. It can actually be more expensive than to execute in the old way, and we don't want to end up there with such great ability to actually make things faster and cheaper in terms of our execution. The other thing we're finding is the 3 loops, nothing groundbreaking there. You would have seen a version of that before, but we're finding you still need to plan what it is that you're going to do. You still need to set your strategy, you still need to choose what you're going to work on. Then you still need to release and deploy that information, or release it to customers, or release it to users wherever you are in your work lifecycle. What's probably changed is that middle loop, which is how you define, design, and build your products, projects, and solutions. That has changed. You might be really aggressive and be building first. You might get to rapid prototypes really quickly. Most organizations I've been in aren't quite there yet. They're still designing first, but that process is now much quicker or more dynamic than it used to be in the past. So that middle loop and how you govern that, you probably don't want to govern that at every single step the way you used to in the past. You want to find a way to move quite quickly through that middle loop, but still get the right level of governance and oversight as you're working through that. So things like we found that design phase, having a really good high-level design becomes really critical, because the amount of cybersecurity work and the amount of risk work and the amount of legal review that has to happen has gone up. So getting to design quickly, we found, has been really helpful, because that starts to shift left some of the work that we needed to do. We don't want it to really lag and shift right because there's more of it than there ever was before, and that can really slow you down. So things like cloud governance can blow out, things like AI governance can blow out, things like FinOps can blow out. All of that work can shift right if you haven't shifted left on some of the design phase. Again, stuff we've always known, but it's just become more critical as we work through it. And then being able to embed your guardrails throughout is really critical. So we've dynamically, we did a lot of work around our guardrails. Chris knows as well. It took us work to define them, but now we have them all in usable policy information. We can now embed that directly into the life cycle so that it happens at the point of work. And that's been a huge game changer. Also because you've got great AI models that can consume, if you think in a business rules as code construct, your AI models can now consume that and make sure you are compliant. So you can be compliant by design, as opposed to compliance having to happen as a step. And it's amazing now what, if you're in a regulated industry like I am, what your models can pull and assume from the regulation and bake that into the work that your teams are doing. But thinking about that step, I think, is a big ninja move. I might just jump ahead to a little bit about teams, and this is a bit of a busy slide, so apologies. But the thing I wanted to call out here is the big shift that we're seeing is the sort of two-pizza team is changing, right? Is it a one-pizza team? Is it a one-slice team? Is it a half of a slice team now? Nobody really knows, but the trend that I'm seeing is probably closer from, you may have had a product or business context person or a SME versus the amount of, say, engineering capability you would have in your teams. It used to be about one for every 10. It's probably now closer to 1 to 3. And some people are saying it could go to 1 to 1 or even 1 to 0. So I just wanted to call out that trend for you, is one, the concept of a team is getting smaller. And so, again, simplest way I would think about this is drop everything one level. So a team can now be an individual. A team of teams can now do an entire value stream. Right? So they're now the size of a team. You could have 10 people that is looking at an entire business unit. And what used to be a team of teams can now be an organization. So if you just even think in that simple framing, it does change the dynamics of how our teams operate. But the good news story there is huge opportunity to unlock capacity. So if you think about, for the same cost, we have to do twice as much work. The good news is if we structure it well, we can get there, if not more. So I think that's a huge savings. It does create this fear from people around, oh, does that mean, if teams are getting smaller, does that mean our teams are going to lose their jobs? Again, I think the work is shifting, right? So you would have seen there's been a lot of organizations that have stripped roles out only to put them back in because they underestimated how that could be done. Also, there's a huge opportunity for you to get work in the hands of your customers more quickly. And I think for a country like New Zealand, like capacity and capability becomes less of a challenge. And so now you can reach further and higher in terms of what it is that you want to do. So I think it goes back to our strategy, and is it dynamic enough, and are we thinking aggressively enough for what we could be able to do with the same cost base, but an expanded capacity to execute and a much faster ability to execute. So hopefully you as leaders can take that out there and go, hey, we've got this game-changing technology that we can add into how we operate. It's going to allow us to reach higher, further, faster, and hopefully you as leaders can get out there and do that. That's all I had for you today. Thank you very much.